Okay, good morning, good evening, whenever you're watching this. Happy day before the AP Psychology exam. I'm super excited for this exam based on your final exam, which I'm grading right now. You guys are going to do awesome. These final exams were super, super strong, like crazily strong for how rigorous the questions are. One thing that was particularly impressive is in the question about Dr. Franklin, research methods, relationship between stress and illness. Almost everyone who I've graded so far, so I've graded period 3 and 5 so far, almost everyone got 8 out of 8 points for this question. I know we've seen this question before in a past exam, but you guys did really, really well on it. And this kind of covers like most of the key parts of a research methods question: statistical technique, ethics, operational definitions, type of research method, random assignment. So I feel really excited that we all just did amazing on that question. I wanted to mainly focus this video on giving you feedback about the other question, the one about John's idea to increase reading, to increase students' reading, and yeah, overall, you guys did well on this question. There were 2 parts, so the retroactive interference and the central route to persuasion, that most people, that these were like the most common mistakes. So I wanted to show you some exemplar student responses and just perfect a few things about these types of questions before you take the AP tomorrow. Today is definitely not a day to cram. Just try to stay as relaxed as possible, fit in as much practice, as much review as you can, and hopefully this video will help in just refining a few quick things before the AP. Okay, so without further ado, in this email, you should be able to open up this document called Exemplar Student Responses. So these were, there are so many exemplars. These were just some of the first few that I graded, and I copied and pasted them in here to show you some strong responses. I want to go through, read through what I think made these really strong and just clarify like a few tiny things. Okay, so let's actually focus on the question that I just mentioned, the one about John's argument, and let's start by reading through the question. Super quickly before I start, many of you mentioned in the reflection at the end of the lesson last week that you actually you felt like you had plenty of time to finish all of the questions, which is amazing. There were very few people who looked like they kind of got cut off. It looked like most of you were able to fully finish your answers in the amount of time, which is awesome. So yeah, congratulations. Tomorrow's timing should feel comfortable for you. In response to declining reading scores in local schools, John wrote an editorial suggesting that students need to increase interest in reading books by providing students with incentives. Based on research showing a relation between use of incentives in student reading, he recommended providing a free pizza coupon for every 10 books a student reads. Okay, let's pause for a second to make sure we can process that. So he wants students' reading scores to increase. He wants to give students incentives, and he's recommending every 10 books that a student reads, he's going to give them a free pizza coupon. And he thinks this is going to solve the problem of low reading scores, is if we just give students rewards for the amount of books they read. Interesting. I wonder if that would work. And then the first part says, explain how each of the following psychological concepts can be used to refute John's argument, or be used to counter or to weaken John's argument. So how can we disprove John's argument? By using correlational research and the overjustification effect. So I thought this first, like just even what the question's asking you to do is a little bit weird, but overall you guys did really well on this. And let's look at what one of our students said. Rodrigo said, correlation, I would just add, correlational research is a method of research in which the relationship between two variables are studied and analyzed. Okay, John suggests giving students pizza coupons for reading 10 books, but this is based off of research that incentives and reading have a relationship. This can be seen as invalid because correlation does not equal causation. There may be other factors that contribute to the increase of reading other than incentives. Okay, this is exactly what they're looking for with this question. In the description, you can see, based on research showing a relation between use of incentives and student reading. And Rodrigo's absolutely right. Just because there's a relationship between incentives and student reading, we can't scientifically conclude that incentives are causing students to read more. So John might be kind of misunderstanding correlational research and saying, oh, that must mean that giving students incentives causes them to read more. So his own misunderstanding. If you were trying to argue against him, that would be an amazing argument to use. You could say, John, you're confusing correlation with causation. Just because you think these two things are related doesn't mean that one thing is causing the other thing. So you're wrong. Okay. And then second, the overjustification effect. This is super interesting. Overjustification effect is this idea that by giving people rewards to do something, they actually become less internally or intrinsically motivated to do it. So for example, in this case, if we give students pizza for reading, they'll actually never learn to just love reading for the sake of reading. They'll just want to do it for the prize. They'll just want to learn to read for the prize. Actually, I had an elementary school teacher who gave us ice cream when I forget how many books we had to read to get ice cream, but I wonder if that affected my relationship with reading. Okay. Rodrigo said, overjustification effect is when rewarding someone for completing a task that is already motivating causes them to lose interest in completing the task. That's a great paraphrase. Very clear that this is in his own words. This can refute John's argument because if there are people who already enjoy reading and don't need incentives to read, they might stop reading because of the extra rewards. This can further decrease interest in reading in his school. Excellent. Yeah, so if John's coming at you trying to tell you that this is a good idea, these are two really strong arguments to refute him. Saying that students could actually become less motivated if they're given a reward because it's now motivated by an external prize versus their internal love of reading. And two, that correlation, the research he's looking at isn't necessarily proof that incentives cause students to read more, because correlation is not causation. Okay, next up, B. Explain how schedules of reinforcement can be used to strengthen John's plan. So here, what they want you to do is mention a specific schedule of reinforcement. So if you remember way back to when we were all in person in the classroom, we did this with pretzels. So everyone, I split you guys into groups and everyone acted out a different schedule of reinforcement. There's fixed interval, fixed ratio, variable interval, variable ratio, continuous. There's a whole list of them. And you guys acted out what that looked like by giving the pretzels as the reward. So let's see what Rodrigo said. He said a fixed ratio schedule is a method of reinforcement where after a certain number of times a behavior is shown, a reward is given. By given a pizza coupon for every 10 books read by a student, students will be motivated to read more books because they know they will be rewarded after reading 10 books. This reinforces reading and can lead to an overall increase in reading at John's school. Cool. So we know that about human behavior. When we're trying to train someone to have a specific behavior, like reading, and we're giving them a reward, we want to follow a certain reward schedule. So Rodrigo picked fixed ratio, which would be every 10 books, have a pizza coupon. Every 10 books, have a pizza coupon. Every 10 books, have a pizza coupon. You could have used variable ratio. Many of you did use variable. here, which is fine as well. So that would be like, sometimes they get a reward after 3 books. Sometimes they get a reward after 7 books. Sometimes they get a reward after 15 books. That would work as well. It's a little bit, takes longer to train someone if you're using a variable schedule of reinforcement, but it also creates a more powerful learning. So it would create a more powerful incentive to continue reading that wouldn't extinguish or wouldn't go away over time as easily. Okay, but all that aside, I was looking at the rubric, you actually don't even need to mention the name of the schedule to get the points here. You totally can, but as long as you describe an accurate schedule of reinforcement, so if you say like every 10 books, give a kid a coupon, that totally is fine according to the rubric. You don't have to include the name. So many of you didn't include the name and you still got full points for this part. Okay, I'm going to try to make this a little bit faster. C, explain how each of the following psychological phenomena could influence a reader's view of John's argument. Okay, so paying close attention to the wording of this. They want us to talk about how someone reading John's editorial could be affected by these phenomena. So put ourselves in the perspective of like, we're reading John's article. How are all of these things going to affect us as readers? The most common mistake I saw in part C was just you still were trying to apply these terms to like the reinforcement schedule. It was just like a little bit confusing and all over the place, but we just want to make sure we're like answering the specific question, thinking about how the readers of John's article would be affected. So belief perseverance, how is that going to affect you as a reader of John's article? Rodrigo said, belief perseverance is a person's tendency to keep a belief even when presented with contradictory evidence. A reader who believes that incentives decrease reading interest may hold on to that belief even when evidence that shows John's argument as completely valid and accurate is presented to them. Cool. Any example would work here. Also, just to point out, I know we've talked about this 1,000 times, this is a perfect structure. First sentence, he's paraphrasing the definition. Second sentence, he's applying it to the situation. You would not score if you just paraphrase the definition. You also need that application to the situation. Okay. So, anything that shows that the reader might hold on to a past belief and not, sorry, my dad's calling me, that's holding on to a past belief and not be open to learning something new because they want to hold on to their beliefs, even when faced with contradictory evidence. Okay, central route to persuasion. We didn't talk about this, but it might show up on the AP. It's basically just persuading someone with logic and facts. So you're persuading someone, like keywords to use here would be logic, facts, or research. So central route to persuasion is using logical arguments and explanations to convince someone of something. That's a great, simple definition. Convincing someone using logic. This can be used to reinforce John's argument to a reader by showing evidence and using logic and clear explanation that shows how the argument makes sense, and as a result, changing the reader's attitude on the argument. So central route, you're persuading someone by getting straight to the point and being like, look, there are statistics, there are facts, there are logical reasons that back this up, so you have to agree with me. It's a good way to persuade someone. Retroactive interference. This was another commonly missed one. So this is when new information blocks out old information. A few of you had reversed that. So yeah, just keep in mind retroactive when new information blocks out old information. A reader may not agree with John because they remember that they read an article that shows that negative reinforcement increases reading, but in actuality, like they learn that incentives increase reading, and they confuse that fact with a more recent article. So anything where your more recent reading or knowledge is replacing old knowledge. I'm about to run out of time, but read through all of the exemplars in this and reach out if you have any questions. Best of luck. And I look forward to hearing how the AP went and seeing you at the Kahoot review session this afternoon. Bye, guys.